For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8823, putting patients first by strengthening provider accountability in FECA Act as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8823, a bill to amend the Federal Employees Compensation Act to allow the Secretary of Labor to suspend payments to medical providers who have been convicted of fraud.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Wahlberg, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Tecano, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to insert extraneous material on H.R. 8823.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 8823, bipartisan legislation that protects both taxpayers and the federal employees who rely on the Federal Employees Compensation Act, when they are injured on the job. Federal workers who are navigating an injury deserve timely, honest, and compassionate care, not to become the target of fraud. Programs like FECA exist to ensure these workers receive the medical treatment and support they need to recover. Unfortunately, some bad actors have exploited that trust. Instead of following through on their responsibility to care for injured workers, certain medical providers have treated FECA like a personal ATM, submitting fraudulent claims, abusing the system, and enriching themselves at the expense of both taxpayers and the very people they were entrusted to help. The Office of Inspector General recently testified before Congress that since 2015, it has opened more than 320 criminal investigations involving the FECA program. These investigations have resulted in the indictment and conviction of 322 individuals and more than $1.7 billion in recovered funds. This is unacceptable. Every fraudulent claim weakens a program that countless injured federal employees depend upon. And every act of deception undermines confidence in a system that exists to support workers during a difficult moment in their lives. H.R. 8823 delivers a straightforward, common-sense solution. It codifies existing Department of Labor policy to prevent medical providers who are convicted of defrauding FECA from continuing to receive taxpayer-funded payments through the program. If someone has been found guilty of exploiting injured workers and stealing public funds, they should not continue to profit from the very program they abused. This legislation sends a clear message, Mr. Speaker. If you cheat taxpayers, exploit injured workers, and abuse the public trust, there will be consequences. Fraud should have no place in our workers' compensation system. Ambulance-chasing schemes and dishonest providers have taken advantage of this program for far too long. Today, we have the opportunity to put on an end to that abuse and reaffirm that these funds are meant to serve injured workers, not line the pockets of fraudsters. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 8823 and tell these scammers that their payday is over. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 8823, putting patients first by strengthening provider accountability in FECA Act. Providers are the greatest source of fraud in the Federal Employees Compensation Act program, otherwise known as FECA. For example, during this committee's oversight of the opioid crisis, we learned about corrupt compounding pharmacies that were crushing up pills and putting them in the creams. And even though the medicines in those pills were not absorbed through the skin. a 15-ounce tube of this useless cream got charged to the FECA program for $15,000. Existing rules allow the Labor Department to strike a provider from the list of eligible providers in the FECA program when they're convicted of fraud in any public health program. But those rules do not enable the department to stop payment on any claims that a convicted provider has already submitted prior to the conviction. That could amount to millions of dollars in claims with a high risk of fraud moving through the system. There are, of course, due process issues that could arise, but this bill already contemplates those issues by empowering the Labor Department to develop appropriate rules for implementing the new authority. All in all, this bill closes an important gap and protects taxpayers. I'm grateful to my colleagues, Representatives Omar and McKenzie, for their leadership on this issue. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm privileged to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Workforce Protections and the author of this legislation, Mr. McKenzie.
Pennsylvania is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 8823, the Putting Patients First by Strengthening Provider Accountability in FECA Act, which I am leading alongside my colleague, Representative Omar. H.R. 8823 amends the FECA program, or the Federal Employees Compensation Act, to codify the Department of Labor's ability to suspend payments to medical care providers who have been convicted of fraud with respect to this program. Each year, the FECA program provides benefits to hundreds of thousands of injured federal workers. This is their system, and they deserve for it to operate efficiently, reliably, and effectively. That requires us to establish common sense protections against bad actors who would abuse FECA and rip off the federal workers in the process. Throughout this year, we have heard numerous concerning reports of providers targeting federal programs with fraudulent schemes, and FECA is no exception. As chair of the Workforce Protection Subcommittee, I held a hearing in which we witnessed and heard from those who testified about fraud costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, money that could have gone toward providing quality care to federal workers who were injured. This is unacceptable. Every dollar that goes to a fraudulent provider is one less dollar going towards providing high-quality medical care to an injured federal worker. That's why, when a provider is convicted of fraud, the Department of Labor should have clear authority to shut down the flow of taxpayer dollars that was going into their pockets. Currently, DOL has the authority to suspend payments to medical providers who are convicted of fraudulent activity. However, this authority has not been codified and also could be rescinded at any time. When it comes to protecting taxpayers and injured workers, our laws must be clear. No dollars should go to fraudulent providers now or at any point in the future. That's why H.R. 8823 gives DOL the permanent authority to block bad actors from hijacking the system that federal workers rely on. H.R. 8823 does not aim to restrict access to medical care for our injured federal employees. Instead, this bill helps ensure that care is only delivered by providers who meet clear standards of professional and ethical conduct. It's time that we give taxpayers and federal workers the common sense, bipartisan protections that they deserve, and that is why I urge all of my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Michigan reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I'm prepared to close, so I'll reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm also prepared to close.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This simple bipartisan bill protects taxpayers. It does so without weakening the FECA program. It simply targets truly bad actors, corrupt physicians, pharmacists, and other providers who exploit injured federal workers and rip off the FECA program. This is an example of the kind of reform that makes sense. We're not saving money by turning our backs on the people who need these benefits. Instead, we're focusing the attention where it ought to be, on the providers who profit off of workers' pain unlawfully. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Families across the nation carefully budget every dollar they earn to provide for themselves and their loved ones. When they send their tax dollars to Washington, they deserve to know that their hard-earned money is being managed with the same discipline and responsibility. The American people expect us to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. They work hard, pay their taxes, and deserve to know that those funds are not lining the pockets of fraudsters who exploit the system for personal gain. Fraud is never a victimless crime. It steals taxpayers' dollars and diverts funds away from those they are intended to serve. Every dollar lost to fraud is a dollar that cannot be used to provide legitimate care for injured workers or fulfill commitments we have made to them. Congress has a responsibility to protect both the integrity of our programs and the taxpayers who fund them. That means ensuring there are real consequences for those who abuse the public's trust and preventing them from continuing to do so. It also means taking common sense steps to strengthen accountability and safeguard the programs that millions rely upon. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 8823 does exactly that. It helps ensure that providers who have been convicted of defrauding the Federal Employees Compensation Act program cannot be continued and allowed to profit from the very program they exploited. This is a straightforward measure that protects taxpayers and strengthens accountability and preserves the integrity of an important program for injured federal workers. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, stand up for responsible stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and vote yes on H.R. 8823. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 8823 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. What purpose does the gentleman from Michigan?
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. House will be in order. For what purposes the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1118 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R.
Used contracting procedure for commercial products and services. Federal agencies rely on the multiple awards schedule to purchase that can actually lead to higher prices over time as contractors pass hidden administrative or ongoing support costs fiscal year 2026 in the National Defense Authorization Act, putting the civilian agencies on equal footing with our defense agencies. This bill will maximize the federal government's ability to get the best value when procuring modern technology. I thank and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 1118, the Value Over Cost Act of 2025 as well. The GSA maintains a list of goods and services that they can order from vendors called a multiple award schedule. This simplified process allows the government to make orders quickly and get contracts, and this is a common sense bill that will make sure the federal government spends its dollars wisely while delivering the American people services they need. So I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields or reserves? The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this important government-wide procurement reform bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and with the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7283.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 7283, a bill to amend Title 41 United States Code to amend the time period for certain acquisition-related dollar thresholds.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramanian, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time that I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ensuring Federal Purchasing Efficiency Act is a simple common sense reform to government procurement. The Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council is required to adjust certain dollar thresholds, such as the simplified acquisition threshold, every 5 years. However, everyone has seen how quickly the value of money can move in just 5 years. This bill would simply require these thresholds to be updated every 3 years instead of every 5 years. These dollar thresholds define the applicability of different policies, procedures, and restrictions to the procurement of property or services needed by federal agencies to achieve their missions. Raising these dollar thresholds more frequently saves taxpayer dollars on administrative costs, increases competition to do business with the government, especially for small businesses. And I urge my colleagues to support this important government efficiency reform legislation. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 7283, the Ensuring Federal Purchasing Efficiency Act as well. Every 5 years, the federal government adjusts the dollar limits that we pay for certain goods and services to reflect inflation, and this bill would simply make it every 3 years. It will help ensure that the government can purchase what it needs. It will also make the government bidding process more competitive with the private sector, and it will help us get more value for taxpayer dollars. And so I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of my bill, H.R. 7283, the Ensuring Federal Purchasing Efficiency Act. This common sense bipartisan legislation is a government procurement reform bill that allows for far more efficient government spending and reduces the burden on small businesses by ensuring they don't have to navigate different procurement policies from year to year. The Federal Acquisition Council is responsible for making inflation-related adjustments for Title 41 purchasing thresholds. Title 41 of the U.S. Code establishes how the federal government acquires goods and services. These dollar thresholds define the applicability of different policies procedures, and restrictions to the procurement of property or services by federal agencies. Currently, the Federal Acquisition Council makes inflation-related adjustments to purchasing thresholds every 5 years. This bill simply amends Title 41 U.S. Code to require the Federal Acquisition Council to make these adjustments every 3 years instead of 5, as my good friend from Missouri mentioned. Importantly, this bill does not change the procurement threshold criteria for government agencies. By allowing these inflation-related adjustments to occur more often, it allows federal acquisitions to better align with purchasing power. In other words, it allows them to be more, say it with me, efficient, something that we need more of at this federal level. Adjusting for inflation on a more frequent basis will save tax dollars spent on administrative costs and will help small businesses by freeing them from navigating different procurement policies every single year. This bill will allow for increased competition to do business with the government and allowing contracting officers to spend more time focusing on larger, more complex procurements. This bill represents part of a suite of procurement-related legislative requests from the administration, specifically the GSA and OMB. I urge my colleagues to support this common-sense, bipartisan legislation to promote more government efficiency, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Other speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves.
I thank the gentleman from Missouri for this bill, and I encourage my colleagues to support it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The
Madam
gentleman
Speaker,
from Missouri is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this government procurement reform bill that will lessen administrative burdens for federal agencies and companies doing business with the government. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 7283? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and the motion. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri? Oh, for what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek to be recognized?
I object to the vote on the ground that the quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2069.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2069, a bill to amend the Federal Funding, Accountability, and Transparency Act of 2006 to ensure that other transaction agreements are reported to usaspending.gov and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, each will control 20 minutes.
Madam Speaker,
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support this bill, H.R. 2069, the Stop Secret Spending Act of 2025, which requires federal agencies to report complete and accurate information to usaspending.gov. The Federal Funding, Accountability, and Transparency Act, as later amended by the Data Act of 2014, established usaspending.gov, a public database of all government spending. It is critical that government spending is transparent to the American people so that they can be assured that agencies are appropriately using their hard-earned tax dollars. Transparency is fundamental in building trust in government. For 20 years, agencies have been required to be more transparent with how they are spending taxpayer dollars, but unfortunately, gaps have been identified in what gets reported to usaspending.gov by federal agencies. Increasingly, federal agencies have relied upon spending authorities known as, quote unquote, other transaction agreements, or OTAs. OTAs are not subject to certain federal acquisition laws and requirements, and most importantly, are not required to be reported to usaspending.gov under current law. Agencies use different methods to report the billions of dollars in spending related to OTAs, according to the Government Accountability Office. This has led to inconsistent reporting and unreliable information, resulting in a lack of full transparency over how billions of dollars are spent by federal agencies. To be clear, the Data Act of 2014 intended for all federal spending to be captured on usaspending.gov. The Stop Secret Spending Act corrects this issue by requiring OTA spending to be reported to usaspending.gov. The bill also requires agencies to report annually on types of funding that previously were unreported for a variety of exemptions. Lastly, it restores the requirement for Agency Inspector General to review the entirety of data submitted to usaspending.gov to ensure that it is complete and accurate. H.R. 2069 will provide more transparency to the American people and allows taxpayers to hold agencies accountable for how they spend your money. I urge my colleagues to support this very common sense legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The American people are working hard to make ends meet, and so they deserve to know how the federal government is spending their tax dollars, and the Stop Secret Spending Act of 2025 helps. It increases transparency on how taxpayer dollars are spent by requiring federal agencies to disclose other transaction agreements, or OTAs. These contracts have historically been excluded from public reporting, but they account for nearly $20 billion annually. This is a common sense measure to increase transparency in federal contracting. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Moore.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the American people work hard for every dollar they send to Washington, and they deserve to know how every one of those dollars is spent. That is a simple principle behind the Stop Secret Spending Act. Federal agencies have been able to spend billions of taxpayer dollars through what are known as other transaction agreements, those OTAs, without fully reporting those expenditures on usaspending.gov. These agreements may have legitimate uses, but the American people should not have to wonder whether federal spending is being disclosed or not. When our national debt is approaching $40 trillion, transparency is not optional, it is a responsibility. This bill closes a loophole that has allowed significant amounts of federal spending to remain outside the public reporting system. It does not ban OTAs. It does not create unnecessary red tape. It simply requires the agencies to report these agreements so taxpayers can see where their money is going. Every family in Alabama knows where their money is spent. Farmers know where their money is spent. Small business owners know where their money is spent. The federal government should be held to that same standard. Sunlight is one of the best safeguards against waste, fraud, and abuse. Transparency helps Congress do its job. It helps taxpayers hold Washington accountable, and it helps restore trust in government. That is common sense, that is accountability, and that is exactly what the American people expect from their government. Madam Speaker, I urge our colleagues to support the Stop Secret Spending Act, and with that, I'll yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Costs are skyrocketing, and people deserve to know how their money is being spent, and so I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this important government-wide federal spending transparency reform bill that will help the public and Congress understand exactly how federal agencies are using the very limited tax dollars that we have, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2069? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek to be recognized?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4123 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4123, a bill to improve federal technology procurement and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
And I yield as much time to myself as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of my bill, the Procurement Act. Hardworking taxpayers expect the federal government to be a responsible steward of their hard-earned dollars. They make tough financial decisions every day, and they rightly expect Washington to exercise the same discipline and restraint. Too often, however, our federal procurement system does the opposite. It rewards inefficiency, layers on unnecessary administrative burdens, and slows down agency operations, all at the expense of the taxpayer. These inefficiencies drive up costs and limit agencies in their ability to deliver timely and effective results. My bill, the Procurement Act, addresses these challenges through targeted common sense reforms in the federal procurement process. The legislation focuses on reducing unnecessary administrative burdens, improving coordination across agencies, and strengthening the acquisition workforce through better training and clear guidance. To improve workforce capability, the bill requires the Director of Federal Acquisition Institute to develop and implement cross-functional information and communications technology training for acquisition professionals. This ensures those responsible for purchasing information and communication technology have the tools and knowledge needed to make smart, cost-effective decisions. The Procurement Act also increases efficiency by expanding the use of simplified commercial-style purchasing. It raises the micro-purchase threshold from $10,000 to $25,000 and the simplified acquisition threshold from $250,000 to $500,000. Purchases under the micro-purchase threshold require no contracting officer involvement and significantly reduce the administrative overhead. Raising this threshold alone is estimated to save more than $40 million annually while allowing contracting officers to focus on larger, higher-risk acquisitions where oversight matters the most. Increasing the simplified acquisition threshold further reduces administrative costs and improves economic efficiency for small businesses that are competing for federal contracts. In addition, the Procurement Act authorizes advance payments for cloud computing services, allowing federal agencies to access the same upfront payment discounts that are commonly available in the private sector, delivering additional savings to our taxpayers. Taken together, these reforms streamline procurement, reduce wasteful spending, and improve accountability without expanding government or creating new bureaucracy, ultimately leading to disciplined acquisition practices and real savings for the American taxpayer. I thank Chairman Comer for his leadership and commitment to advancing this legislation. I urge my colleagues to support it, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from
I reserve.
the gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 4123, the Federal Improvement and Technology Procurement Act of 2025. I'm proud to be co-leading this legislation with the gentleman, and I thank him for his leadership, and I'm glad this bill is bipartisan. One of the things we focused on the Oversight Committee is improving government efficiency and modernization, and the Procurement Act delivers on that goal. It raises the micro-purchasing threshold and the simplified acquisition threshold. These thresholds have not been updated in a very long time. They don't reflect how much things cost these days, and these changes will finally allow agencies to move faster to purchase innovative technologies. The bill also allows federal agencies to prepay for information technology subscriptions, including cloud computing. And prepaying for IT subscriptions will make a huge difference in government access to cutting-edge tools. The bill will also open the door for more small businesses to participate in federal contracting. And most importantly, it's estimated to save taxpayers millions and millions of dollars. This is common sense and everyone wins, so I urge my colleagues to join me and Representative Burleson in supporting this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I couldn't have said it better than my colleague, Representative Supermaniam. I urge my colleagues to support this long overdue government-wide procurement reform bill that will help the federal government to more efficiently obtain the systems and services that it needs to support our critical missions. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I also urge my colleagues to join me and Representative Burleson in supporting this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4123? Those in favor, as amended. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6330 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6330, a bill to amend Title V United States Code to provide for lump sum relocation payments for federal employees relocated in the interest of the government and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Reallocating federal employees who receive assignments to change official duty stations is a costly and bureaucratic process. According to the General Service Administration, which manages such relocations, in fiscal year 2024, the cost for employee reallocation across agencies range from $11,000 to a staggering $143,000 per employee. This high cost contrasts with the private sector, where reallocation costs are considerably less. In fact, current law and regulations require 7 categories of mandatory reallocation entitlements and another 6 discretionary. This complexity diverts federal agency resources that could otherwise be available for other mission-focused priorities. It also comes at the expense of federal employee satisfaction, as those reallocating are forced to navigate a prolonged bureaucratic maze of document filings and payment processes. Fortunately, there is a tested alternative to the current system, as demonstrated by agencies such as the Fish and Wildlife Service and Customs and Border Protection in a recent pilot program. Those agencies have utilized this pilot program to provide negotiated lump sum payments to relocating employees who are then responsible for moving themselves. The simplified lump sum payments and processes have already been demonstrated to reduce agency costs while boosting employee satisfaction. This bill would expand and codify the successful pilot program to allow all agencies to provide these lump sum payments to relocating employees when such alternative is the most cost-effective option. Furthermore, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that enacting H.R. 6330 would save the government $306 million over 5 years. I thank my colleague for offering this legislation and urge my colleagues to vote in favor and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise regarding H.R. 6330, the Federal Relocation Payment Improvement Act. As mentioned, the bill would allow federal agencies to pay for employee relocation costs through a simple lump sum payment. It also directs the government to establish an appeals process for employees to dispute reimbursement decisions, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Jack.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Representative Burleson. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 6330, the Federal Relocation Payment Improvement Act. I am grateful for the overwhelming bipartisan support this legislation received in committee, and I am grateful for the opportunity to present it before the House of Representatives for consideration today. Madam Speaker, our Republican majority was elected on a promise to make the federal government more efficient, reduce bureaucracy, and ensure taxpayer dollars are spent responsibly. My bill fulfills that pledge by streamlining the federal employee relocation process, reducing administrative burdens, lowering costs for American taxpayers, and modernizing an outdated system. To understand why this reform is necessary, let us review how the current process operates. Each year, approximately 33,000 federal employees relocate across the country to meet the operational needs of their agencies at a cost of nearly $1.5 billion to the taxpayer. Under current law, a federal employee who is directed to relocate pays relocation expenses out of pocket, retains documentation for each of those expenses, submits then detailed reimbursement requests, and then waits sometimes more than 2 years to be fully reimbursed. Meanwhile, the agencies tasked with administering these relocation reimbursements dedicate significant time and resources to reviewing, processing, and reconciling each claim. In some cases, a single relocation can generate more than $140,000 in administrative cost. The result is a process that is burdensome for employees, costly for agencies, and inefficient for taxpayers. Fortunately, Madam Speaker, there is a better way. Federal agencies, including the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, have participated in pilot programs that provide employees with a single upfront lump sum relocation payment instead of requiring reimbursement for each individual expense. And when given the option, federal employees have overwhelmingly chosen this streamlined approach. For instance, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported nearly $1 million in administrative savings. And the GSA estimates expanding this authority across the federal government could save taxpayers between $300 million and $500 million annually. Madam Speaker, that is the purpose of my legislation, H.R. 6330. My bill makes this successful authority permanent and available to every federal agency. My bill preserves agency flexibility by keeping participation optional, and my bill requires agencies to report to Congress on the savings achieved, ensuring continued accountability to Congress and the American taxpayer. For federal employees, this means a simpler and more predictable relocation process. For federal agencies, it means fewer administrative burdens and a more efficient use of administration resources. And for American taxpayers, it means an estimated $300 million to $500 million in annual savings. Thank you to our chairman, James Comer, for his leadership in advancing common sense government reforms, and to my colleague, Representative Burleson, who has distinguished himself as one of the greatest defenders of liberty in Congress, and the members of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform for their thoughtful consideration of my legislation. I urge all of my colleagues to support my bill, H.R. 6330, and I yield back to Mr. Burleson.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman
Reserve.
from Missouri is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this important government-wide reform bill that will save hundreds of millions of dollars while improving the lives of government's and federal workforce. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6330 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion is to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1722 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1722, a bill to require an annual report on taxpayer-funded projects that are over budget and behind schedule.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
And I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Congress cannot sit on the sidelines while government projects continue to soar above cost projections and run behind schedule. Each year, the Government Accountability Office reports on such projects, including federal information technology programs and National Nuclear Security Administration projects. However, there are likely additional government boondoggles flying under the radar, falling years behind schedule or running billions of dollars over budget. The $1 Billion Boondoggle Act would keep policymakers and the public better informed about government-funded projects that are significantly behind schedule or over budget. We cannot fix what we do not know is broken. This bill directs agencies to report on projects that are more than 5 years behind schedule or have expenditures that are at least $1 billion more than the original cost estimate. The Office of Management and Budget is then required to submit an annual report to Congress summarizing these troubled federal projects. Congress has a duty to oversee the federal government for inefficiency and waste. This bill informs policymakers and allows Congress to address failing government projects before further taxpayer dollars are misused. A similar bill passed the House in the 118th Congress as Senate Bill 1258, and the identical Senate Bill 766, sponsored by Senator Joni Ernst, passed the Senate in December of 2025. I thank Representatives Marionette Miller-Meeks and Yasamin Ansari for their work on the House companion bill. It is time to get this bill sent to the President's desk. I urge my colleagues to support this common sense legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too rise in support of H.R. 1722, the $1 billion Boondoggle Act of 2025. Congress has a duty to ensure taxpayer dollars are spent efficiently, transparently, and with real accountability for results. But federal programs often fall behind schedule or go way over budget without Congress's knowledge. This bill would require that Congress be notified of any project that is more than 5 years behind schedule or $1 billion over budget. The report would include explanations of any changes to the project's scope, cost estimate, or completion date. This will help Congress perform critical oversight on behalf of the American people. It'll also keep projects on time and on budget, and this is a bipartisan fix to increase fiscal responsibility. So I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the bill, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Iowa, Miller-Meeks.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Rep. Burlinson, for yielding me time and for your support of this important legislation, H.R. 1722, the $1 billion Boondoggle Act. Also, special thanks to my fellow Iowan, Senator Joni Ernst, who is leading this bill in the Senate. She's been a true champion when it comes to exposing Washington's waste and protecting the hard-earned dollars of the American people. Madam Speaker, Washington's worst-kept secret is its prolific spending problem. Families in Iowa and all across this country have to balance their checkbooks every single month. They budget, they plan, and when money is tight, they make it work or they do without. Washington should be held to that very same standard, especially at a time when our national debt is inching towards $400 trillion. But instead of accountability, we get boondoggles. Take the governor of Newsom's high-speed rail in California. It was supposed to cost $33 billion and connect Los Angeles to San Francisco by 2020. Today, it is more than $95 billion over budget and years behind schedule. After more than a decade and billions of taxpayer dollars, they are only now beginning to lay track, and the promised line between Los Angeles and San Francisco is nowhere in sight. What the people were promised and what they got are two very different things. But it's not just California. In Honolulu, a rail project is $4.8 billion over budget, with its completion slipping from 2020 all the way to 2031. In Columbus, a corridor project is 19 years behind schedule. The Federal Reserve's renovation ballooned to nearly $2.5 billion. Air Force One is billions over budget and years behind. And the VA's electronic health record system, meant to serve our veterans, tripled from $16 billion to nearly $50 billion. Madam Speaker, these are not rounding errors. These are betrayals of the people who have paid for them. That's why I introduced the $1 billion Boondoggle Act. It is simple. It requires the federal government to publicly disclose any taxpayer-funded project that is more than $1 billion over budget or more than 5 years behind schedule. No more hiding, no more burying the failures where no one can find them. Sunlight, as they say, is the best disinfectant. Because here's the truth. The American people have a right to know where their money goes. Every dollar Washington wastes is a dollar taken from a farmer in Iowa, a child needing care, a nurse working a double shift, or a young family trying to get ahead. I did not come to Washington to protect its comfortable habits of wasting taxpayer money. I came here to defend the people who pay the bills. This bill puts them front and center where they belong. I want to thank Senator Ernst once again for her partnership, and I urge all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this common sense legislation. The people of Iowa are watching. The people of America are watching. Let's give them the transparency they deserve. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the sponsor of the bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this important bipartisan and bicameral government reform bill that will ensure the necessary oversight of the over-budget and behind-schedule federal projects that take place. Only when Congress and the public have better visibility into these mismanaged government projects will we be able to avoid such boondoggles in the future. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1722 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection.
Madam Speaker.
Oh, for what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5578 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5578, a bill to ensure that whistleblowers, including contractors, are protected from retaliation when a federal employee orders a reprisal and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Every person employed by the federal government should have adequate protection from retaliation for speaking out against fraud, waste, or abuse of taxpayer dollars. However, contractors with the federal government have different whistleblower protections than typical government employees. The Department of Housing and Urban Development Office of the Inspector General found that a lack of whistleblower protections for contractors discouraged them from coming forward. This isn't surprising. It is a difficult decision for someone to come forward and risk their job and their livelihood. The Expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act would address this by strengthening whistleblower protections for federal contractors by prohibiting reprisals for certain actions. Such actions could include disclosure of information the protected individual believes is evidence of mismanagement, waste, abuse, or a substantial and specific danger to public health and safety related to a contract or grant. I want to thank the House Oversight Committee Ranking Member Garcia for his work on this important bill with Chairman Comer and recognize Senators Gary Peters and Chuck Grassley for their steadfast leadership on these necessary reforms. And I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan and bicameral bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 5578, the Expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act. Whistleblowers are crucial to our ability to conduct congressional oversight. They are key to identifying and stopping waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse of power. And millions of workers performing critical jobs for the U.S. government are contractors, not federal civil servants. But they don't have the same whistleblower protections as civil servants right now. And as a result, contractors are less likely to report wrongdoing, especially since they fear retaliation or mistreatment. And this bill would strengthen protections for contractors. It protects them from retaliation for refusal to participate in illegal activity. It also ensures that contractors are legally able to disclose waste, fraud, abuse, and dangers to public health and safety. This bill will help us do our job to uncover abuses of power. So I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman is reserves.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm prepared to close. I want to thank the ranking member for his leadership on this issue, especially at a time when a lot of folks in the federal civil service and federal contractors are concerned about coming forward. We need to protect whistleblowers more than ever. And so I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this important whistleblower reform bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 5578, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3029 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3029, a bill to amend the Research and Development, Competition, and Innovation Act to support nucleic acid screening and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin, and the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Salinas, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 3029, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 3029, the Nucleic Acid Standards for Biosecurity Act, introduced by Representative Salinas of Oregon, along with Representative McCormick of Georgia. This bill is about protecting 2 things we all care about: American leadership and the life sciences and the security of the American people. Today, an American company or university laboratory can legally order made-to-order DNA, the basic building blocks of biology, and have it delivered in a matter of days. This technology powers new medicines and vaccines, stronger crops, and advanced manufacturing. It is a real source of American strength, but the same technology that lets us build the biology of the future could, in the wrong hands, potentially be used to assemble the genetic material of a dangerous pathogen. Responsible providers already guard against this. They screen incoming orders against sequences of concern and verify the identities of their customers. However, as this field continues to advance rapidly, the lack of common technical standards and best practices for screening presents an emerging biosecurity risk. That is exactly the kind of work the National Institute of Standards, or NIST, was built to do. NIST is our nation's measurement and standards laboratory. It does not regulate industry. It provides industry with the tools, the benchmarks, and the best practices needed to get this thing right. H.R. 3029 directs NIST to carry out the measurement research needed to make this screening more accurate and reliable by improving screening tools, securing databases of concerning sequences, and developing ways for providers to demonstrate that their screening systems work as intended. It also directs NIST to convene a consortium of the people who actually do this work, including industry, universities, and nonprofit organizations, to develop consensus best practices and a roadmap for the future. This legislation does not create a new regulatory regime for American biotechnology. It strengthens our biosecurity while safeguarding the innovation that keeps us ahead of our competitors. And it passed the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee on a bipartisan basis. I thank Representatives Salinas and McCormick for their work on this bill. I urge my colleagues to support it, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Salinas, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, American biotech companies are leading a scientific revolution that is transforming our economy. In recent years, we've seen breakthroughs that have delivered promising new treatments for Alzheimer's, new biological alternatives to pesticides, and plastic-eating bacteria, just to name a few. These innovations are making Americans healthier, driving a more sustainable economy, and supporting good jobs. But while America leads the world in these emerging technologies, our competitors are close behind. If we want to ensure American industry stays on top, then American consumers must have confidence in the safety and reliability of our advancements. One of the key ways American companies produce these breakthroughs is by producing synthetic nucleic acids, like DNA and RNA, for use in biotech research. These are an important tool that allows scientists to study gene function, develop novel vaccines, improve diagnostic tests, and pursue countless other life-changing discoveries. Companies like Twist Bioscience in my district are pushing the envelope to accelerate and scale up production, which in turn will facilitate faster discoveries. As this field advances, particularly with the deployment of AI systems to design nucleic acid sequences, we need to double down on efforts to ensure the technology is used safely and responsibly. H.R. 3029, the Nucleic Acid Standards for Biosecurity Act, directs the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, to carry out measurement research and lead consensus-driven standards development to ensure these tools can be harnessed in a trustworthy manner. Businesses, small and large, in Oregon and across the country will benefit from this partnership with NIST. These standards will drive sustainable growth while helping to keep this industry and the good jobs it supports right here in America. Through a common sense partnership between government and industry, we will unlock responsible and trustworthy growth that benefits industry, workers, and consumers across the economy. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields. Reserves.
Madam Speaker, I have no further requests for time, and I'm prepared to close, and I continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I too have no further requests for time and on this bill, and I'm prepared to close. And I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I want to extend my great gratitude to Chairman Babin, Mr. McCormick, for his bipartisan work, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 3029. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. H.R. 3029 is a practical, targeted bill. It directs NIST to develop the science-based standards and best practices needed to make the screening of synthetic DNA much more reliable, helping to ensure that the very technology driving American biotechnology cannot be turned against us. And that is why this bill earned bipartisan support in the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and why it deserves the support of the full House today. So I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3029, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3029 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Last time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8790 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8790, a bill to amend the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 to direct research, development, demonstration, and commercial application activities in support of next-generation geothermal and closed-loop geothermal systems in various conditions and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin, and the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Salinas, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 8790, the bill that is now under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 8790, the Next Generation Geothermal Research and Development Act, sponsored by my colleagues, Representatives Harrigan and Salinas. This bill amends the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 to include novel geothermal approaches and directs the Department of Energy to support these baseload energy-producing technologies. Thanks to breakthroughs in drilling methods pioneered by the oil and gas sector, we can now drill deeper and increase rock permeability. As a result, regions of the United States that were once unable to support baseload geothermal electricity generation are now viable for power production. This comes at an important time as we race to connect baseload energy to the grid to ensure that we have both reliable power and grid stability needed to support continued economic growth and technological advancement. The bill directs the Department of Energy to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Department of the Interior to facilitate the sharing of geothermal data and to improve understanding of the subsurface. This legislation also provides a critical update to the Department of the Interior's drilling data repository by including additional data sources, periodic updates, and standardized data to enhance its overall functionality and usability. Curating data from public lands gives the government, academia, and industry a better understanding of the subsurface and the resources beneath our feet. This bill also builds upon the success of the Department of Energy's Frontier Observatory for Research in Geothermal Energy, or FORGE, by requiring next-generation geothermal testing at 1 or more additional FORGE sites, if deemed necessary by the Department of Energy. Research conducted at FORGE has provided clear evidence that through innovative drilling, next-generation geothermal systems can be used to generate power. The Next Generation Geothermal Research and Development Act authorizes the Department of Energy to foster this emerging industry by awarding grants to accelerate the development, testing, and implementation of innovative technologies that improve the performance of next-generation geothermal energy projects. Once again, I would like to express my appreciation for the work of Representatives Harrigan and Salinas on this legislation, and I urge on this issue my colleagues to support the bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, Americans are facing an affordability crisis. When I talk with Oregonians, they tell me that one of the biggest challenges they face right now is the rising cost of electricity. In addition to rising demand, aging infrastructure, and rising fuel costs, climate change-driven disasters like winter ice storms, wildfires, and drought are also driving up the cost of electricity. We need more tools to ensure we can deliver the reliability and affordability that consumers need. Geothermal energy already delivers clean, round-the-clock power in the western U.S., Building on recent innovations, next-gen geothermal technologies can play an important part in the transition to an affordable and reliable clean energy future across the country. Oregon is already a leader in this space, producing the 5th most geothermal electricity in the U.S. Oregon Institute of Technology opened Oregon's first geothermal power plant in Klamath Falls campus, and for 60 years, the school has heated buildings and supplied hot water with geothermal energy. Now, Oregon is leading the charge with next-gen geothermal technologies. Newberry Volcano in Central Oregon is a hotspot, anybody laugh? For geothermal innovation. The industry is piloting commercial-scale power plants there, and they are demonstrating new technologies that will allow geothermal systems to operate in extreme heat conditions, which greatly expands the role that these resources can play in our energy mix. This is not just about Oregon or the Mountain West anymore. Next-gen geothermal technologies will make it feasible to deploy geothermal energy across the country and serves as a critical tool in the fight against climate change. This renewable energy will help meet America's energy needs across the nation. Now, the federal government needs to lean in, partner with the private sector, and ensure these technologies move quickly to market so that Americans feel the benefit sooner rather than later. H.R. 8790, the Next Generation Geothermal Research and Development Act, will support new geothermal research, development, demonstration, and commercialization efforts at the Department of Energy to overcome the remaining engineering challenges and take this technology from promise to reality. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harrigan.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, when Americans think about energy, they usually think about things that we can see: oil fields, natural gas pipelines, nuclear power plants, wind farms. But one of the greatest energy opportunities in our country isn't above ground. It's beneath our feet. That's why I'm proud to rise in support of my Next Generation Geothermal Research and Development Act, legislation I'm leading with Congresswoman Salinas. America has an extraordinary opportunity to unlock a new source of reliable, around-the-clock power. A single supercritical geothermal well has the potential to produce more than 7 times the energy of a conventional geothermal well. And experts estimate next-generation geothermal could ultimately provide up to 90 gigawatts of electricity right here at home. The problem is not that our country lacks the resources, but we lack the technology to fully unlock it. This bill helps close that gap. It directs the Department of Energy to tackle the engineering challenges that still stand in the way of commercialization, expands real-world testing, and strengthens the partnerships between our national labs, universities, and private industry that have always driven American innovation. This is exactly what the government should be doing, not picking winners and losers, but helping solve the kinds of technical challenges the private sector can't solve alone. Reliable baseload power is no longer a luxury. As AI transforms our economy, manufacturing returns to America, and electricity demand continues to grow, we need to be investing in the technologies that will power the next generation. More reliable American energy means lower costs for hardworking families, a stronger electric grid, and less dependence on foreign adversaries. This bill does exactly that. I want to thank Congresswoman Salinas for her partnership, and I urge all of my colleagues to support the Next Generation Geothermal Research and Development Act. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further requests for time to speak on this bill, and I am prepared to close, and I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Harrigan, for his leadership on this sensible bipartisan bill. Thank the chairman once again, and I urge everyone to vote yes on H.R. 8790. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In closing, the need for the United States to increase reliable baseload energy is very clear. To help meet this demand, the House has recently passed multiple bills to accelerate the development of geothermal energy. This legislation builds on those efforts and will help geothermal play an even greater role in meeting our nation's energy needs. H.R. 8790 authorizes and directs the Department of Energy to support the research and development of next-generation geothermal technologies, helping ensure that American leadership in this emerging industry remains number one. I again want to thank Representative Harrigan for his leadership on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support this simple bipartisan measure. And before I close, Madam Speaker, I'd like to insert into the record an exchange of letters on this bill between the House Science Committee and the Committee on Natural Resources.
Without objection.
And with that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8790 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.